The head of this prison sewed the prisoners into a kilometer-long chain so as to not feed them. Now only the first one eats. The story begins with a prison accountant named Dwight Butler showing Warden Bill Boss the first and second parts of the movie The Human Centipede. What he sees does not impress the insane boss. He considers these films to be meaningless trash. He insults Dwight and immediately switches to his secretary Daisy, who tries to keep the conversation going. The boss regularly bullies Daisy and keeps her at bay. After that, the boss is called to one of the cells to deal with the offender. Dwight tags along with the warden and says that compared to other U.S. prisons, their prison has the highest turnover, violence, and medical costs. They must change the situation as soon as possible, otherwise the governor will fire them. But the boss doesn't want to hear anything. As the boss walks down the corridor, all the prisoners curse him. The boss stops at one of the jail cells. A tattooed prisoner, who is locked up in it, begins to troll him. The boss remembers the prisoner's number and promises to deal with him later. Soon the chief approaches the prisoner who beat the guard. Upon learning that the prisoner is right-handed, the boss breaks his right hand. Dwight asks the chief not to get carried away so as not to increase medical expenses. Boss and Dwight return to their office. The chief measures his pressure and freaks out because it is too high. Dwight proposes to still discuss ways to reduce prison costs. He found some ingenious solution to all the problems, but the boss does not allow him to speak. The warden says the current prison system is too lenient. Boss considers the Inquisition to be the ideal of justice. One of the prisoners calls the chief and says that he managed to escape from the cell. Now he is heading to the boss's office to punish him. The distraught chief is terrified of the prisoners. He closes the door to the office and hides under the table. Then Dwight grins and finds out that the prisoner did not break out of anywhere. He just used his monthly phone call to scare the boss. The angry warden crawls out from under the table and promises to punish the offender. Soon this prisoner, a Native American by nationality, is brought to a special cell. He is tied to a table. The boss and the prisoner have a verbal fight. After that, the boss orders the guards to bring several buckets of boiling water. When boiling water is delivered to the cell, the boss covers the prisoner's face with a towel and pours all 3 buckets on it. The prisoner remains alive. After that, the boss returns to the office. The governor of the state comes to see him. For the sake of the guest, the boss tries to restrain his evil nature. As Dwight predicted, the governor is unhappy with the cost of the prison. In addition, he condemns the methods used by the boss, because it spoils his election campaign. The governor promises to return in 2 weeks and fire the boss and Dwight if things don't change for the better in the prison. As the governor leaves, the boss becomes hysterical. He is not going to improve anything. He prefers the idea of performing a vasectomy on all the prisoners. Despite Dwight's protests, boss orders the prisoners to be gathered in the yard and delivers an angry speech to them. He promises to perform a vasectomy on everyone and decides to start with the tattooed prisoner, who recently insulted him. The tattooed prisoner is immediately taken to a separate cell. Boss prepares a knife and performs the surgery himself. After that, he asks Dwight to take the severed organs to the cook and plans to eat them a little later. Boss returns to the office and persuades Daisy to make love in Dwight's presence. The secretary does not dare to argue with the boss, because one day he will get her father out of prison. For dinner, boss is served the strange delicacy which he had ordered. The boss prays before the meal, and eats the dish with appetite. After that, the chief goes to the hospital wing. The Native American with the burnt face has already come to, but his wounds haven't healed yet. He again breaks the arm of the prisoner he had crippled earlier. Also, boss continues to mock the tattooed prisoner. But the prisoner does not give up. He threatens boss with revenge. Dwight asks the chief to pay attention to the fact that vasectomy does not make the prisoners more submissive. In the evening, the boss gets drunk and threatens everyone with a weapon. He is upset that the vasectomy did not produce results. Taking the opportunity, Dwight finally conveys to the boss the idea to make a human centipede out of all the prisoners. To do this, you need to sew the mouth of one criminal to the ass of another and connect everyone in a chain. After that, there will be no fights and disrespect in the prison. Dwight thinks this would be the perfect punishment for criminals and cut prison costs. The accountant even set up a meeting with Tom Six, the director of the Human Centipede films, to discuss whether such a centipede could be created in real life. The boss is categorically against this idea, because he cannot stand films more insane than himself. The chief sends Dwight away and threatens him with dismissal. As frustrated Dwight leaves, the boss continues to rage. He goes to the cafeteria and gets even more drunk. Here he is found by a crowd of prisoners. The frightened boss kneels down and tries to justify himself for all his atrocities. He assures that he was simply following the orders of the leadership, but in fact he did not want to harm anyone. The boss complains about poor health, but the crowd is indifferent to his pleas for mercy. They seize the hated tormentor and threaten him with cruel reprisals. The tattooed prisoner wounds boss in the side and mocks him to the screams of the jubilant crowd. Suddenly, the boss comes to his senses and realizes that it was just a hallucination. Tom 6 arrives at the prison the next day. Dwight urges the boss to sit quietly and listen to the plan to create the human centipede. The head physician of the prison also comes to the meeting. Tom 6 assures that a centipede can be created in real life, because during the filming of his films he consulted with surgeons. The prison doctor also sees no barriers to creating a centipede. He explains that the prisoners will feed on each other's feces, and the necessary vitamins and minerals can be obtained by injection. After these words, the boss is imbued with the idea of creating a centipede. He admits that such a manipulation is much more sophisticated than a vasectomy. Dwight thought of everything down to the smallest detail. Instead of cutting the knee tendons, he suggests using a compound that temporarily paralyzes the knee joints. For additional fastening of the head to the buttocks, leather straps can be used. And when the prisoner has served his term, he can be disconnected from the centipede and set free. Tom 6 asks to be allowed to attend one of the operations. The doctor is ready to take the necessary tests from the prisoners and begin operations. The boss decides to first show the prisoners both parts of the human centipede, and then announce their fate to the criminals. While watching the films, the prisoners feel disgust and refuse to watch it. At this time, the boss comes to them and announces that soon all the criminals will become part of the centipede. The prisoners are horrified and riot. Boss and Dwight hide in their office. First, the prisoners break into Daisy's office and beat her up. Then they try to kick down the door to the chief's office. At this time, Dwight calls SWAT, and the boss jumps out the window. Special forces deal with several prisoners and suppress the riot. The criminals are taken to cells, and boss takes a tranquilizer rifle and methodically puts each of them to sleep. After that, the unconscious prisoners are taken to the hospital compartment. The chief enjoys what is happening. The doctor informs that the surgeries have already begun and asks boss to decide the fate of the prisoners who have health problems. So, the chief orders that the mouth of the tattooed prisoner to be sewn to the butt of a prisoner with incessant diarrhea. Another prisoner has an intestinal stoma that will prevent him from becoming part of a centipede. Not wanting to better understand it, boss gets rid of him. Afterwards, boss and Dwight visit Daisy, who is still unconscious. Boss is aroused by the sight of the girl, and he begins to pleasure her. Boss and Dwight return to their office. They watch the latest operations through binoculars and rehearse a meeting with the governor. In this case, Dwight plays the role of the warden, and boss, the governor. The men act out a skit in which the governor allegedly declares that for the creation of a human convict centipede, boss is destined for a place in the Hall of Fame along with Neil Armstrong and Muhammad Ali. And also boss is honored with all high state awards. Dwight tries to remind him that he was the one who came up with the idea, but the warden is too caught up in his brilliance. At this time, Tom 6 arrives at the prison. He can't wait to see the operation in real life. On the way to the hospital wing, boss, 6 and Dwight pass by the cell of a prisoner who is already eating his own feces. Boss shoots this prisoner because he doesn't want anyone to feel good in the centipede. All surgeries are already coming to an end, but 6 still manages to watch one of them. The director becomes uncomfortable with what he sees, but the excited boss invites him to take a look at the upgraded centipede. In a separate ward, those sentenced for life undergo a special surgery. 6 gets sick and runs away. Dwight is horrified and does not understand why this is necessary. Boss intrigues him and takes him to the office. Finally, the centipede is ready. Dwight happily reports this to boss. Soon the governor enters the office. He doesn't understand why boss and Dwight are so happy and is about to fire them. However, the boss openly flatters the governor and invites him to take a look at the centipede, which is located in the prison yard. The governor is perplexed by what he sees. Then Dwight begins to explain how the creation of a centipede will save a lot of money on the maintenance of prisoners. The accountant is sure that none of the criminals who serve their time will want to connect their lives with crime in the future, so as to not return to prison and become a part of the human convict centipede again. This will drastically reduce the crime rate. The freed funds Dwight proposes to spend on education, medicine and nursing homes. Taxpayers will adore the authorities for creating the centipede. The governor is trying to quell his nausea when he notices that Daisy has also become part of the centipede. The boss explains that this is his idea. After that, he shows the governor the icing on the cake, a human caterpillar for life sentenced. Soon boss, Dwight and the governor enter the ward where a prisoner is sitting, who has already served his term and is therefore disconnected from the centipede. Now he prays and thanks boss for deliverance. There is a scar around his mouth that will forever remind him and those around him of his punishment. The governor, horrified, sinks onto the couch. He says that this is a violation of human rights and public morality. The governor declares that he has had enough and quickly leaves. Dwight sits down next to the downcast boss and realizes that he is a dead man. The warden puts a gun to his head, but changes his mind and points it at Dwight. Just then, an enthusiastic doctor enters the room. He is ready to start a nationwide centipede campaign. But boss shoots him. The wounded doctor falls to the floor and the warden slays him. During this time, the governor has time to think things through and returns to prison. He suddenly takes a liking to the human centipede. The governor is even sure that, thanks to this discovery, he will be able to become president. He praises boss and Dwight and leaves. Dwight points out that it was his idea. The boss congratulates his subordinate, calls him a genius and hugs him. But he does not want the glory to go to Dwight, so he gets rid of him. The boss strips naked, climbs the tower and screams over the human centipede, reveling in his triumph.